The end is near. The end is upon us. The 25th episode of Orb fully takes place here. We ended last episode at a kind of a weird spot almost, and the entire episode itself was in a weird state as well as to where we are timeline wise, what everything between, the beginning and where we are now even was, what it was meant to represent and be, and now where we're going to end ourselves, likely not at the part that I think we were anticipating as the series was starting off. So it's a weird thing considering this is conclusion as well, to my knowledge. But that's also intriguing for the decisions that are made. So I'm excited to get into this as we have the great minds all kind of put together here. They're going to be able to explore and have Albert firsthand kind of deal with and figure out before I'm assuming that we flash ourselves back to where he was in time. So I'm excited how that's going to end up playing itself out and what it's going to mean for his future endeavors and how he plans to kind of dictate the rest of his, remainder of his life towards actually getting back on track with this being something that he's intrigued by, and no longer letting it be something that he just kind of puts on the back burner. So hopefully whatever he learns here and whatever Raph teaches him is useful and helpful and gets him to that point that we can end at like a very content, like, nice, I'm glad we're here sort of ending. It's been a long journey. I apologize for all the delays. Some of them not my fault, some of them definitely my fault, but we have made it. We have made it to the end. I hope you guys enjoy. If you like it all, hit the like and subscribe. They do mean a lot to me. Feel free to stick around for the discussion. And after the discussion on the episode, we'll talk about the series as a whole. Some not too crazy in depth, but some just overall thoughts about what's going on there. Check out the Patreon as well for early access to the new series that we are starting after this. It should be up by the time you guys see this episode. Without saying much more, though, let's get going with the series finale of Orb. We are the free-minded individuals, plunging into the unknown. He's a little young. He knows his stuff, though. Thank you, Ralph. That's what we thought about you early, You knew your stuff. And curiosity. I feel like I've seen that. I feel like I've seen that somewhere. Believe in ourselves and the curiosity of the mind. Beautiful speech, brother. We get the OP. No end OP here, huh? Cool. You brought me here, you did all this. Always been a great guy. What is that supposed to mean? Where are you going? Don't be afraid. Join into the conversations. They'll gladly welcome you. So much knowledge for you out there. No, the breaking habit. That is true. I don't know about that though. Gotta be consistent.
ちょっと帰ります。今日はありがとうございました。
おう、また来いよ。
はい、失礼します。運が良ければ、父さんに馬を出してもらってすぐ戻れるかも。
Yeah, I have a feeling you're gonna get back and father's gonna be gone, buddy. Why did Raph leave? That's the question I need to know. What was this? Is this what he attended to? I hope not. Yeah. It is! Are you kidding me? Why? He told you not to leave. But why? No, you don't. Yeah, sure, easy. Okay, explain.
最初に言いたいのは、こんなことになったのは僕の本意じゃない。
You did it though. I don't care what you intended.
少し前に噂で聞いたんだ。君のお父さんがある資料を持っていると。それは宇宙の形を根本から変えてしまう画期的な説に関するものだ。
And he wouldn't give you them? So you killed him?
だからぜひ情報を共有して研究しようと提案した。悪い提案じゃなかったはずだよ。
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily sound terrible. But he's not on board.
君のお父さんの手には余る代物だ。
Right.
僕の頭脳と社会的地位がなければ宝の持ち腐れに終わる。協力の見返りも十分与えるし、双方が得する提案だった。けど、ここで問題発生だ。
Okay, yeah, get to it. So I killed him. That's not good reasoning.
この説は現状の宇宙論と異なるもので、弾圧される可能性もある。子供もいるから危ないことはしたくない。だってさ。
Sure. So I removed him from this situation. I don't know if I'm on your side here, brother.
政治次第でいくらでも避けられる。
Right.
なのに聞く耳を持たない。いや、それだけならまだいい。粘り強く説得してたら彼はいい。
So he was afraid to jump into the deep end and harm his child. I don't think I can side with you, man.
まあ、とにかく取り乱して今にも何かしでかしそうだった。だから落ち着かせた。しょうがなくね。君のお父さんは死を共有しないで独占してた。それは
the worst, yeah, the worst thing a man could do.
考えは排除すべきだ。いいかい？この状況で大切なのは、これで君のお父さんが受け継いだ地は失われずに済んだってことさ。この世の美しさのためなら犠牲はやむを得ない。さあ、これで納得したろ？
Yeah, but it doesn't have to be the loss of a life for that. Now we're back in, yeah.
彼はその演説が終わってすぐ村の人たちに捕らえられました。その後は
He was so cool before. Now I don't know how to feel.
あっけなさすぎる。父は言った。疑えと。結果、彼は誰も信頼せず、資料を共有しないで殺された。先生は言った。信じろと。
Right, I was fully with him last episode.
信念に従って殺人も厭わなくなった。
Yeah.
これが地に関わったものの末路です。学問だの真理だのは人間には荷が重い。だから大学なんて全く馬鹿らしい。
肉体と魂、理性と信仰、哲学と神学、疑うことと信じること、これらの矛盾は両立します。なぜか。それが人間だからです。人間は神でも獣でもない、その中間に存在する。でもだからこそ、矛盾を、曖昧を、混乱を受け入れられる。むしろそこで、
A way of thought being open into your mind.
奇跡とは、必然に満ちた領域で生まれる偶然のことです。と同時に、 偶然に満ちた領域で必然が生まれることです。昔のあなたはそれらを感じていた。この世のすべてが奇跡的だと知っていた。
Right, so easy to take on.
しかし、経験や記憶、過去や故郷、そして痛みと引き換えに奇跡まで失ってしまった。
Mm-hmm.
それこそあなたが生きる場所だったのにです。どうすればいいかわかりますか？
知りませんよ。
単純です。
You want him to tell you?
空を見ればいいのです。
Face it.
そして深く息を吸う。
これはそんな
Experience the miracle.
もちろん。でも乗り越えられないわけじゃない。
Gotta take steps.
神は真実な方です。あなた方を耐えられない試練に合わせることはなさいません。むしろ耐えられるように試練とともに脱出の道も備えてくださいます。
Hmm.
友人を見殺しにしたことです。発端は友人がある仕事で重大な違反を犯してしまったんです。取り返しのつかないことをした。その結果、彼は死んだ。あの時どうするのが正解だったのか、答えは出ていません。今後も出るかわかりません。今日まで私があの過去から目をそらしてきたことです。でも今初めてこの悩みを言葉にできた。そのせいで今日からより一層苛まれるでしょう。
But it's freeing.
しかし同時に今日が一歩目になったと信じます。
Steps, baby steps.
です。あなたは私に話してくれた。だからきっと進める。
Don't bottle it all up.
神は私たちを認めてくださる。そして神はいつでも私たちの居場所になってくださる。しかしそのためには私たちが私たち自身を乗り越え、神に向き合わなければならない。
And that's what looking back at the past does. Allows you to reflect and face yourself, but don't dwell on it too long and provide an ability to move forward.
神は口を開かない。
そうですよ。
Yeah.
だから永遠に私たちは考え続けられるのです。
Right. It allows you to explore and find on your own.
幸福だと思いたい。効果を捧げればパンを得られる。
Mm-hmm.
税を捧げれば権利を得られる。
Sure.
労働を捧げれば報酬を得られる。なら一体何を捧げればこの世のすべてを知れると思いますか？
Constant theme has been their own life.
その答えを探してください。
何のために？
この世で再び生きるために。
Well,
そこで大学へ行くのは一つの道だと思いますよ。では、神のご加護。
yeah, I suppose don't shut down opportunities directly put in front of you, you know, based on the experience of the past. I suppose take that shot and look up for the first time. Cool. Can we trace fully without freaking out? Imagine if it was like that, you could just look up and draw in the sky using... Solve the puzzle correctly, you know? Gave him the indication that he was right, lit up. Cool. All of them.
先生、この世の美しさを追求したい。そのために何か犠牲になっても構わない。はっきり言って僕も同意見です。だけどあなたのやり方では美しさに到達できなかった。この世の全てを知るために何を捧げればいいかなんてわからない。けど隠そうとする父さんも排除しようとする先生も有効じゃなかったことだけは確かだ。
Yeah.
僕らは足りない。だから補い合える。そうじゃなきゃ この世界には挑めない。人間は社会的な動物だ。先生、僕もタウマ善意を感じます。それを肯定し続けます。あなたとは違ったやり方で。
Correct the past.
信じながら戻って、美しさに、きらめきに迫り詰めてみせます。
Proud of you, brother. And that's what it is, right? His dad refused the opportunity to work together in the route that he chose to take, but instead, if we choose the opportunities put right in front of us, work with others, expand.
君が入学希望者のアルベルト君だっけ？
はい。
じゃあここにサイン。
Look how happy he is to be here.
アルベルト・ブルゼフスキ。
ブルゼボ、僕の地元の名です。サインの際にはそれを。
はーん。ま、なんでもいい。
Whatever, I don't care. Looking and facing up. Still trying to get this letter delivered, man.
でも住所は間違いなくここなんですが。
10%.
そう書いてあるけど、以下の著作物が出版された際、利益の1割を贈与します。なんて気持ち悪い。しかし、この本ってやつの題名もなんだ？地球の運動についてって。
Holy shit.
気違いかな。運動するのは天球だし。
なんか怪しいな。出版されるって本が同封されてるわけでもないし。
地球の運動について。
Holy fuck. What? I love when shit hits you like that and you take that moment of pause and you're like, wait a fucking minute. Well done. Nice. He found the future.
数学と自然哲学を教えた。彼は当時の天文学の教科書惑星の新理論への注釈書を書き、同書は大学で広く学び続けられた。1491年、彼の注釈書で天文を学んだ同大学の生徒の一人にコペルニクスという名の青年がいた。
Really now? Cool. So that's how we tell our story without needing to do it. And with that, we come to the conclusion of Orb. We have Albert who finds his way through the past that he's able to eventually overlook and find his connections within, conversations between those who have directly influenced him and led him to the point that he's at now. Through further discovery and connection of other humans, finds that the only way for him to progress any further, not live his life in the constant state that he is, and for a consistent evolution of the world and finding the truth that they are once and for all after, you got to kind of work with others. You got to kind of continue to move forward and can't be stuck in this way almost, right? Demonstrated directly through where Raph and his father were, of, some who would take it too far for the things they do and, are solely focused on their own work and what they can do, which was presented to us initially in the forms of somebody like Bedeni, who literally was like, only I can do something along these lines, right? But the continuous work that he later had with somebody like Oxy and the partnership that they were able to grow to lead them to a point that they were able to, kind of progress things further, even in their own passing, is something that he can kind of connect this to. Although he doesn't know that story, but I guess we can connect this to. With him, seeing that his father didn't want to give up this information or let anybody else in, and was worried in fear of the things that might happen, instead of having this open dialogue about where they could get to and, where the future would lead them to, and actually have firsthand knowledge of, things passed down before them that led them to this point, to open up their mind a little bit more, to be like that connection and that growth together is what we likely need to progress any further. Instead, it just ended up resulting in a death, unfortunately. But that ended up leading us to a point where we're able to have Albert with an open conversation that leads him to finding that conclusion of being able to look and take those lessons of the past and move forward a little bit, right? Be able to utilize that stuff as the catalyst to make him be like, I am going to correct these things, right? Not for the way of the world fully, but like just for myself and the way that I approach everything, which is what he's able to do. And while not being the one who directly finds that answer in himself, takes up and absorbs everything that the priest says, finds his answer, and is willing to take those opportunities put right in front of him, is willing to work with others and progress things, which ultimately leads to him being the direct likely influence of the man who actually finalizes the theory in regards to heliocentrism, which is really cool for him to be able to get. And it's a nice way to shortly wrap up a character arc that wasn't extremely long, and have somebody go from like losing all hope and everything to being the actual inspiration for it, I think is pretty cool. I'm gonna skip through and talk about some highlights and things that are on here, because I'd prefer just to get around to talking about like the series in its whole, as opposed to where we directly had a lot of stuff within this episode. Because to be fair, I don't necessarily love the episode in its entirety. It's kind of just fine for me. It does what I think it needs to wrap him up and then get us to a likely point of like, this is story sort of end, but doesn't necessarily like keep me like, holy shit, and like think like some crazy shit went down the whole episode. I'll be honest with you. So we get back home. He's the one who kills. It was likely somebody was going to do this from the last episode. We knew that was going to happen, and we were placing a lot of thought into who that could actually be. That being Ralph here is intriguing and not exactly, I think, where we were expecting, but it works perfectly as a point of like having a character oppose another that puts them at odds, that puts the character such as Albert stuck in between them, that he can reflect on that and then be the difference between them going forward, which is really what it's actually utilized for here, right? Somebody who will stop at absolutely nothing and sees no wrong in doing the things that he's doing and taking the life that he is, because moving forward and finding the truth and, that expansion is more important than one single life of someone who's just willing to like kind of withhold any of that. It's a loss that's not necessarily important in Ruff's sort of eyes, right? But at the same time, you have to look at Albert's father's reasoning for the things that he does and be like, yeah, this makes perfect sense. Like, why would I not, go on your way? It's too risky. The people are going to be kind of against it. It could put myself, it could put my kid, it could put all this stuff in jeopardy. And I'm not going to risk any of that sort of stuff. I'm not going to have that freedom of mind and that curiousness that is needed for us to move forward. So it's somebody who's kind of stuck and somebody who's a little too overboard with progressing things a little bit and not finding that common ground to be able to work and actually work together on it, which is where we find ourselves in this conversation, and hopefully relating one story from the priest himself to find Albert's sort of perspective and put him in a spot where he's like, yeah, I can look up at the sky now, I can move forward, and I can utilize these experiences and negatives of the past to expand who I am now as a person and move forward, which is, I mean, it's a good thing overall. And he's able to find that. I was suspecting the whole time if we were going to get like Bedeni being the priest, but we don't end up getting something along those lines. And he's able to connect everything. It's not just one thing at a time. He moved all the way, which is a fun sequence for us to be able to get, which later transitioned into, I don't know if it was here or a little later, of him like looking out over and all the characters kind of at the same place where they ended up dying and looking at the same sky, the thing that they all share between each other ended up being right here, which is really cool. that freedom that he gets. The Petotsky letter still being here is hilarious to me. And then we ended off a little bit with, oh, this is the little timeline of the things that went down. I'm not necessarily sure how I feel about this being the overall conclusion of it. Not actually being able to see this thing that, I anticipated hopefully seeing the entirety of this is a little unfortunate, of course. I don't necessarily think it's something that's completely wrong to do. But I can't say that I love the way that we kind of close out this chapter, as well as the fact that it's just kind of underwhelming in a way, right? Like the typical grand finish that you're almost expecting, that sort of spectacle doesn't necessarily come out of this. We get that moment almost in the flash through of all the characters looking out towards the sky, or him looking up finally and connecting all the constellations and things. But those are kind of they didn't do too much for me. They were a little minimal in what they were, and their impact on me. So it's a little unfortunate that this is where we choose to close, right? It's not the grand sort of peak of emotion and in cinema that we basically get at the end towards episode 23, right? It's instead something else entirely for what it is. Which isn't the wrong decision fully to make. And I personally don't think I could even tell you a way that we could write this out better, because I don't think telling the entire story of how this actually got to the end based on the way that everything was presented 25 episodes into it here was the right thing to do either. So I'm not too sure, but I just don't know if I necessarily feel that connection by seeing words on a screen and being talked to about something, as opposed to physically being shown it, especially in a media where animation itself is the primary thing that we're looking at, especially in a manga format where it's coming from, just reading the words directly as opposed to seeing these drawings and these physical pictures and stuff. And I wonder how different it was potentially in that with the ending. It's a little lackluster, unfortunately. I think us getting this sort of thing out with the movement in the orb that we've essentially been following being the Earth itself is really cool, though. So there's the conclusion on the episode itself, and directing ourselves fully towards the series as a whole. We find Orb being a series that I think is good, and I stop kind of there. I'm in a weird spot where I unfortunately, actively am on social media and within the general space of hearing comments and ways that people feel, as well as using a site like my anime list, for example, where I document my watches and stuff, so I can actively keep track of the things and the places that I'm at, because I'm not using a site like Crunchyroll or something to watch, right? So I can keep track and remember especially where I'm at. And, in those spaces, you end up hearing some chatter, right? You see people as the series is airing, talking about, how special it is, and making comparisons to series and things that I love, like Vinland Saga and things like that. And, seeing a score that's extremely high on these sort of platforms, and all of this sort of chatter gets into the mind of being holy shit, this is going to be something I fall in love with. It's right up my alley, right? But those false expectations almost are what get set by people who aren't you, and put you in a spot where when you watch it, you might either already have an inflated perspective of where things are going to go, and what you're going to have to, unfortunately, compare it to as you go through, because this has been unfortunately put into your own mind, or you can somehow erase that fully and just focus on the product of what's in front of you. And I've continuously fought that battle all the way throughout, which I do, unfortunately, with a lot of other series too, of being, seeing comparisons to others, or just people having expectations for maybe me as the reactor, or just having these feelings that you guys potentially have in your love for the series, or you're coming here to see somebody talk about and watch this, right? You're not coming here to watch somebody shit on a product that you don't like, or have a negative reaction towards these things usually, right? It's find a unique perspective, maybe, hear something that I have to say that you hadn't have thought about before, or watch somebody reaffirm the feelings in general that you've had. And typically those are positive emotions and thoughts that you're trying to get that reaffirmation for. So it puts me in that weird spot, making this of I'm not trying to be overly negative on a lot of different series and things that I do, and in my discussions themselves, while mentioning and staying true to myself of being like, I don't like this or I don't like this, while I do like this, and expressing that as honest and open as I can, trying to find that line between not going too much where it feels complaining or whining or anything along those lines. So I'm in a weird spot in regards to it, because this is a series that I haven't seen people say it's good. I've seen people say it's fucking amazing. It's unreal. It's like this other series. It's expectations that unfortunately are put on to me that the series itself didn't live up to. It is something that, like I said, I try to eliminate from me. Unfortunately, it's still in the back of my mind. But I think I've done enough of a job to kind of disconnect myself fully and be like, I really like these things. I really don't like these things. And hopefully this gives me that opportunity to openly express it to you. While I don't know if I'm going to convey it in the proper way, because it's not pre-written and I'm not going to spend a lot of time to like sit back and really reflect on these things. I'm just going to speak from what's at the top of my head here, and hopefully that registers in some way with you, and maybe you could understand that on a certain level. But like I said, we're put in a spot where I think the series offers a lot. I think the series offers some really cool things throughout, and I really like different aspects of it. I think things like the OP and the consistent changing within it is really sick, and I love that we follow that journey all along. I love the fact that we follow a variety of main characters all the way throughout. It's a experience that I've openly talked about that I would have loved to be able to at one point in life, which I don't think I'll probably ever do, to be fair, or have somebody else do, where they write a story in a way that we follow a main character and that main character eventually dies and we move towards another. In my story and the things I would do, the person who ends up being the one who kills the main character becomes the main character that you follow. It's not something that we necessarily get in this, but as somebody who thinks that that's like a cool idea, the idea that Raph passing early into the series and us switching perspectives was one of the fucking coolest things for us to be able to have. And I absolutely adored the fact that we were going on and following a sort of journey like that, as well as following a story that is so dialogue heavy in terms of communication between characters, and finding these sort of revelations that, in regards to the animation and the things that we visually need to see on screen, don't need to be as dramatic, and allow for those dramatic and you know, actual quality animation moments to be more of that spectacle that you get and be like, we earn this sort of climax that we eventually hit. So it's a nice way to kind of almost pace it and progress it consistently through, and providing a lot more context onto the characters themselves and be able to continuously hopefully find a way to develop them. Is on top of the fact that the biggest highlight throughout this entire thing, is I consistently praised every time it happened, was when every character began to die. All of the scenes that they had, all of the conclusions that they come to, all of the alterations between what we met them at and what they finished at were entirely different, were super cool to actually see actualized here, and the passing of the torch almost that eventually comes for every character who follows afterwards, as well as the way that all the characters were like connected in some sort of way, the constant following throughout with somebody like Novak, the connection that like our 3 had with our second act that we basically went into, that later transitions into Draka and what she ends up doing with Yolenta too, and to bring them all back for the most part in a certain form with Albert, and our conclusions towards the end is a super cool thing. There's so many strong points that continue to find their way throughout this, and they also follow a nice pattern of building upon each episode, where you get to a point of, you're like, I realize and recognize we're at a point where the conclusion is likely coming for each of these specific characters and their arcs based on where we're at, but you can start them off slow. That doesn't have to be this like a high octane sort of thing, and instead you find your way towards the end of their journey, and it feels almost fitting with where it's at. It's a nice slow progression that continues to like build up, and you keep going through all these sort of like peaks. You follow the wave, right? That's where we continuously go throughout the point of this series. There's no real point that I'm like, we're going down and then we have like a crazy peak or something. It all stayed pretty consistent, and then we hit some old peaks, and then we came back down for the most part. And I think that that was really cool. We stayed decently flat in my opinion on these last 2 episodes. They weren't that great to me, unfortunately. Like I said, I think 23 really put itself at a point that the follow-ups were going to be extremely hard to reach, and I don't necessarily know if it concludes on that, and that's something that I'm going to think about continuously over the next like week or so, and let that kind of marinate in my mind a little bit before I have like that final thoughts and opinions on it, until I eventually decide if I want to ever rewatch it or read it or do something along those lines. But all of these positives out of the way, to unfortunately have the one massive gripe that I have with the entire series, and it's the thing that's the most prevalent throughout the entirety of the series, unfortunately finds itself to be probably the least interesting thing to me, which is the actual like realizations that the characters have to come to. It's most prevalent throughout because it's the conversations. Every episode is comprised of like multiple, like just a few conversations usually that are extremely lengthy, that are two characters kind of just not really talking to each other, but instead talking at each other, that result in a realization for one character who almost feels like is being told to feel and think a certain way, as opposed to actually finding that, while they try to phrase it in a way that's like, figure that out on your own. Especially we get that like in the last episode, right? But it's very clearly laid out, like there's only one route for you to go and find that sort of answer that you need to. And we do it, unfortunately, in a way that is the characters in their own time and place having this conversation, having these extremely like lengthy and abstract sort of discussions about these different sort of like philosophical ways of thinking to another, that they feel like they're this crazy momentous like what the fuck type of thing to that version, to that character that's involved. But in reality, it's kind of just something that's normal to think about. And in my mind, a lot of the conclusions that we continuously kept coming to, a lot of the feelings that the characters were unfortunately coming to terms with at the end, were things that felt so incredibly beyond obvious at the, like they say them, and it's like you just had this huge grand way at developing a conversation that unfortunately just boils down to something that feels so incredibly basic and understand, like I can just comprehend that, and I've already thought that in my own mind, and you just put it in like this prolonged and inflated sort of conversation that just didn't amount to anything that was going to like tackle me or like touch me in any sort of way. That I was like, this is unreal. How did they get to that point? It didn't do that for me. The overall development of the series itself puts this philosophical dialogue together that essentially just gives me the answers that I've already been able to kind of figure out on my own. So it just doesn't like I'm able to accept these things that the characters can't in their own time and place, which is a disconnect that I unfortunately am in, because like I'm struggling to put myself in their own sort of shoes for where they're at and the ways that they're trying to think. It's this extreme long way at trying to like articulate the way that they're feeling that just doesn't emotionally register in any sort of way with me. I feel like at times I am being asked to almost be like, holy shit, or applaud these conclusions that I've come to before in my own life. And I'm not at the point, right? And I'm not trying to act like I am, but I'm not in the stage where I can sit there and be like, yeah, I could have written this out in the exact sort of way. But the overall conclusion and end of where most of these dialogues ended up, and the impact that directly in the lesson that it was teaching the characters involved, were not things that I was like, holy shit, like I can internalize that in some sort of way, or connect that, or take that to something at heart that will directly either influence me or maybe give me pause enough to think and be like, huh, I guess that is true, or oh, I never really thought about it that way. It's all just like, here's the truth that you've already recognized in this fancy extended dialogue, and it just felt like it was like, can we get to the point? A lot of the time is how I unfortunately felt. I've had a similar sort of issue with like other series before. There's one in specific I'm thinking where it was like we're trying to build a mystery almost throughout, or we're trying to build these things that we unfortunately come to like a boring-esque conclusion to it, and I unfortunately felt like I was supposed to be reacting like, oh, that was so cool, and they got to that, and instead it just didn't do anything for me. It's a type of almost storytelling, I feel like, or just character dialogue that doesn't necessarily connect to me. I'm somebody who is extremely driven by the, I guess, attachment emotionally I can get to the characters, the ability for me to relate to them in certain sort of ways. And it just doesn't, through the way that things are presented within the series, doesn't do that to me. It's part of the reason why I felt like the characters were not things that I was truly able to connect to or get into. Their own relationships and like the weight emotionally that I was able to feel through like the death sequence and things that they had were not as strong as I think I would have particularly liked. It's just a lot of what we built ourselves to felt more dialogue based to progress the general themes of the series and tell this complete like picture story come towards the end in what we get in these last few episodes, as opposed to make me connected to the character in a sort of way. It felt like they had a bigger worldview as to where we were headed with these things, as opposed to worry so much about the characters that are directly in front of you. And it's why I took so long to get into Oxy and Bedeni as characters. It took me forever to get into them, and by the time I finally did, their deaths, while the sequences and everything were so great, it didn't emotionally leave like much of an impact on me, between me being like visually and kind of just the way I was feeling felt so elevated. It's one of those things that I felt like I was at like a middle ground the entire like time, and then we hit these like small little peaks, and I was like, this is really cool like when we get there. But is the peak that I enjoyed like so good because it was such a drastic difference maybe from where we were beforehand, or is it actually like at that point that it is? So it's like, I don't know, it's these questions and these things that I've continuously wondered, and unfortunately through all the breaks and things that we've had to take within the series, I've begun to think about it a lot in like my free time of like how I'm feeling towards the series as we've continuously developed, and unfortunately that's where we find ourselves to be. So I don't know if what I was saying here I was properly able to convey to you. I don't know if I was able to get to that point, and I still don't think I worded things in the proper sort of way. But I'm hoping that maybe you can at least understand a little bit about potential issues and things that I have with the dialogues being presented in a way that like the general ideas and themes of the show were more important than, say, characters and attachments that I was able to grow to them. So I don't know. I that's where I'm kind of going to be left at. I don't think I provided what I needed to in regards to expressing that, but these are just thoughts in general that my mind has been weighing on with the series for a little bit, and even come towards conclusion here. I unfortunately feel that sort of way. It's good. I don't particularly think I ever really fell in love with it. It has some nice little peaks, but it doesn't really get to that point where it's something that I've continuously been like super invested or thrilled by, especially since the first few episodes. The first few episodes were such high points for me that I don't know if we really reached them at any point outside of the moment where we got to see all the stuff from the books inscribed onto the people's heads, and the sequences in episode 23. Those are probably the only two moments I was like as invested into the series as I felt like I was within the first couple. So it's unfortunate, but that's where we put ourselves at. Hopefully I did enough at expressing the things I do like about the series, because overall I do like it, and it is something that I would definitely recommend to specific types of viewers and friends and things if they were to ask to watch it, depending on things that, you know, I typically know that they enjoy and they like and what I think they could get out of it. But it's not something that just personally was able to connect or move me in any way, and I don't think it's necessarily going to affect or influence me or my life much going forward, which I don't know if I can say the same necessarily for others. It's just, it doesn't really do it for me in that same sort of way. So ends up being just good for me, which is what it is. Thank you though to everybody who joined all the way through the journey. Hopefully you had some fun throughout. Hopefully you can see a little bit as to where I'm coming from, and if not, it is what it is. Explain to me where you're coming from and the way that it made you feel, and why certain things related and connected to you in those sort of ways. And maybe if you think I'm completely off the mark on how it made me feel, and instead you feel a different sort of way, just let me know. I'm always interested to read that and see how people's perspectives can maybe influence me a little bit or get me thinking onto something that's slightly different. It's the type of thing I thought I would get, but didn't necessarily get out of this series, right? The ideas and the influence and the way that it affects the characters and the people, by people, I mean you guys watching this, and how you can express that outwardly to make it like make me reflect and be like, shit, I never thought of it that way. I didn't get that throughout the series itself, so maybe your own writing and your own dialogue can force that to happen. So, or not even force, but just maybe open me up to it a little bit. So I'd be interested to see. It's been a long journey, but it's been fun throughout, and we got ourselves to the end. Check out the Patreon if you want to watch what we're watching next. Fragrant Flower Blooms with Dignity is going to be the series we're watching. Episode 1 should already be up on there if that is something you want to check out a little early before it gets here. If not, all good. Stick around. It'll be on the YouTube very soon. Leave some recommendations of other shows and things that you'd like to see at some other point in the future. If you like this at all or any of the episodes throughout the series, leave a like and subscribe. They do mean a lot to me, as well as any comments about your own thoughts and experience throughout the entirety of this, or just takes on things that I have to say or feel without me saying much more. I appreciate you joining me all the way through. I hope you guys have an absolute fantastic one. Peace.